Hello. So I couldn't possibly do a whole course on essay writing and research without addressing this extremely important issue. It's a bit weird here because obviously you've written your own essay question before, so you can't really then go and analyse it as if you've never heard of it before. But I figure that it may have been a few weeks since you've looked at your essay question, so it might be worth having a closer look at it now, and this analysis process is a good way of doing that. Also, this is really good preparation for the rest of your degree, where you'll mostly be given essay topics by your lecturer. It's actually quite rare for you to define your own essay question until later in your degree, but as you know, we're quite advanced in the UPP. I cannot overemphasize how important this question analysis stuff is. I can tell you right now that the single most efficient way to lose marks in an essay is to answer the wrong question or to not answer precisely the question that's in front of you. You might work really, really hard on an essay. You might have heaps of evidence. You might have a great argument with really good structure, but if you don't properly answer the question that you've been given, rather than the one you think you've been given, you'll find it very hard to progress beyond a pass. Basically, it's about assumptions. People assume that an essay question is about something and it's actually not. So one of the videos coming up gives some good examples of how this works, so take note of that. So how do you make sure that you're answering the question properly? Well, you really need to look at it really very closely and do some analysis of it so that you're very sure about what it's all about. This is useful in a general reflective way. If there are any terms or concepts in the question that you don't fully understand, of course you'll need to go and find out something about those concepts right away. It's a good opportunity also for you to ask your lecturer for any clarification that you need as well. But you'll also need to do some quite in-depth analysis. So the way to do this is to look at three things. Topic keywords, limiting terms, and instructional cues. I'll talk about these in terms of some parts of speech as well, some kind of basic grammar stuff. So if you can't remember some of that stuff from school, it'll help too. So your topic keywords are the very broad terms or things that the essay is about. These are nouns or thing words that describe something in particular. A great example of a noun is like chair. That probably won't be in an essay though. Examples from your essay of nouns or topic keywords could be things like education or students or learning. Now these are pretty straightforward examples, or kind of straightforward I guess, but some of the keywords you get in future essays might be more complex or difficult, so it's all important to be able to identify them. Actually, some of these terms might not be that straightforward. When you talk about learning, what is learning? Your definition of learning is a really important thing, so you need to spend some analysis on that. Of course, these are extremely important words for your essay, these content keywords, because it's what the essay is about. It's the thing that you're being asked about. So make sure you understand them properly. You may need to define them in your essay, especially if they have ambiguous or different meanings, and give some references to different definitions as well, so that you lay the groundwork for your discussion quite clearly, and you and the reader are on the same page when you're discussing these terms. Next up we have limiting words, which are usually adverbs or adjectives. These are describing words. So these are words that give more information about the nouns. They limit the range of meaning of those nouns. So for example, higher education or mature-aged students. So when you talk about students, you might talk about lots of different types of students. You might have Indigenous students or students with disabilities or students with learning difficulties. So these limiting terms give you more specific information and focus about the nouns that you're talking about. So here we're narrowing down to the specifics of what the essay is about, and of course this is also important as well. This notion of narrowing down is really important for essays and research in general, and we've covered a fair bit already. But as you're planning and writing, you might find the need to clarify and narrow down further as you go. If you think a term in your essay question is too broad, talk to your tutor about narrowing it down, because it's easier to make a stronger argument on a narrower topic. It's very hard to make a good argument about a really broad topic. That's why we get you to narrow things down. Finally, in this analysis process, we have instructional cues, which are usually verbs or doing words. Now, there's a good chance that your own essay topic may not have any of these, because it's rather unusual for student-defined essay topics to have them. They tend to be more common in essay topics that are written by lecturers themselves. However, in your later university essays, you'll almost certainly find that your essays include active verbs like argue, describe, discuss or critique, analyse, examine. All of these types of words are instructional terms or verbs that you're being asked to do. So it's very important to note these and make sure that you do what is being asked. It's not just the information or evidence that you've gathered and the fact that you present it, is what you actually do with it as well is a very important thing. You will have experienced this already a bit in your critical review as well. If you're not critiquing properly, you're not doing what the assignment's really asked you to do. So use the link in the margin just next door to find a resource that explains what all these different instructional cues mean. Pay particular attention to discuss. The word discuss is used a lot in essays, and it's often not really clear what it means. And many people don't have a clear idea of how to do a discussion in a formal essay kind of example. So here's an example of how a question analysis might work. These documents are in the folder this week as well if you want to check them out. So here's the original example question. Some cultural commentators have suggested that the decay of civilization can be seen in the poor quality of shows broadcast on television. Do you agree? Examine this claim with reference to 2 to 3 examples. Argue whether or not quality television is dead. Now, to analyse it, we need to start looking at some content keywords. We might look at television, quality, commentators, and so on. These are important words because this is what the essay is actually about. We need to have a clear understanding of what they are and what the context is in terms of the essay. We might then see these terms as being limited by some adjectives. So we've got cultural commentators, for example. And this makes us question, what is culture? What do we mean by culture here? What do we mean by culture? How do we define it? And how does it relate to this essay and this essay question? If we look into this in some depth, we'll see that it's actually quite important in terms of what the overall question is asking about. Finally, we'll look for instructional cues. Things like examine, argue. Do you agree is not directly a verb, but it's kind of asking you to do something in particular. So these words are really important as well because they're asking you what this question is, telling you what to do in this question. Sorry. So here's a bit of a example analysis of that question. All right, you can see that there are individual terms that have been pointed out. There's a definition of culture here. I've actually gone to the dictionary to identify what we mean by culture, and that's given us some ideas about what some of the assumptions that are underlying the question. We've got quality here. Okay, here's a content keyword which is really important for this question. It's actually the most important content keyword for this question. So how do we define quality? This actually becomes a key part of the essay and the whole approach to the essay. So you can see there's lots of notes here. There's some kind of references to dictionaries up the top. There's some ideas of what I'm being asked to do, and I've kind of looked really quite closely to it. For example, it says with reference to 2 or 3 examples. So I know that in this essay I need to use 2 or 3 examples. If I don't use 2 or 3 examples in this essay, I'm really missing a major thing of what they're asking me to do. That's the kind of thing that students sometimes miss. They might use 1 example, and they might forget to use examples altogether, get caught up in the rest of the question. And that's like really serious problem if you miss important things like that. So these 3 elements, these content keywords, limiting terms, and verbs or instructional cues are really important when analysing the question you're about to start work on. Obviously, this is a bit weird to do this with your own question because you've written it yourself, but I'd like you to have a go at it anyway. I think it's an important process and good practice for the future. So what are the broad content keywords and what are the limiting terms that are in your question that you've written for yourself? Are there any instructional cues? I want you to take the essay question and actually underline the words like I've done here. Particularly the most important terms, the focus terms, because you'll use these in a later part of the lecture. Put some notes next to each of the terms. What do you think is important about them? Are there any references you have that relate to these terms in particular? And this will help you when you do your next mind map. Then focus on these terms as you prepare the essay plan and write the essay, and refer back to them to make sure that all your discussion is relevant to the question and the argument that you might want to put forward. Don't underestimate how easy it is to get distracted on this stuff. Get your essay question out in front of you and refer back to it occasionally through the rest of the lecture today so that you can apply what you're learning and thinking about in this lecture to your own question. Okay, so there's a couple of videos coming up. They're pretty short, but they just give you another perspective on analysing questions and instructions. As you watch them, think about your essay question. Have a look at it in front of you and think about analysing it in preparation for your next round of mind mapping. Enjoy!